Okay. I'm Lance, Chairman of the Aviation Board, and I'm calling the meeting to order. This meeting is informational only, bringing for the board. We don't make any decisions today, and there will be no public comment. So that's where we are, no actions. I want to thank everybody for being here. This was an orientation session that I had hoped we would have sometime in the fall of 2024. And we didn't manage it. One of the goals of the board is to help bring Lawrence Airport into the 21st century by revamping non-compliant practices, looking at new standards, which we've been the older members, the more experienced members of have been in development for the last couple of 3 years. Those are going to cover everything from the type of business to CIP funding from the FAA and various other sources. And to do that, we have a number of topics which you could really again going to cover today. The airport history and management structure is fairly detailed, and Scott's going to cover that for us. We do need to note that we are having our centennial. So probably will be in the future. There is currently a program in progress now with Watkins History Museum. We're going to be looking at the roles and responsibilities of the board, including how the boards for the whole city will revamp in 2023 and 2024, and how we need to comply with strategic planning, open meetings, and that kind of thing. Aspect of that is going to be the airport economic impact that we have statistics on basically from almost 10 years ago. So a lot of this extrapolation, but worth noting that it's one of the reasons that we managed to keep this board as a board instead of one person on one. Master planning 2012 and 2025. When I started out 5 years ago, this was my Bible to try to figure out what we needed to do. We had 3 things done. With the list of 35 items in 2012. I'm hoping we'll do a lot better with the new 2025 master plan, including the #1 item. Scott's going to talk about some current airport projects and where we are in them and where the funding is. There will be some discussions about where businesses are on the airport, because I know I was unfamiliar with what, especially on the west side of the field, we needed to know. So that'll come along pretty obviously. And events and organizations, I want people to know what resources we have in terms of groups, the EAA, the Pilots Association, Civil Air Patrol, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and that kind of thing. And events we have done. And I think we've got United Way in September and some other stuff. And then we'll talk about questions and issues. There are a number of issues that are outstanding, and look at our calendar. If we don't get through everything today, schedule. Thank you. If you could start on airport history and management structure, you have a pretty good grip on that, and I'll chime in on a couple of other things too.
Yeah, so I just gave another tour today as well.
Oh, that's right. I got it.
This guy?
Yep, just saying.
We just gave a tour this afternoon before our meeting to this group called New Generation Society, and Katie also helped with that tour, and Mike. So
You always need to share
in
in a minute.
Yeah, in a second. So we, as part of the tours, we always tell a little bit of airport history. So I told the group just a snippet of the fact that we were going to celebrate our 200th anniversary in 2029. There was a group of about 40, pretty active senior citizens, I would call them. It's called the New Generation Society of Lawrence. And I told them if they want to get involved in this planning or committee, to let me know. So hopefully, we might get some additional volunteers.
I'm writing them.
Yeah. But Clancy and I have talked about at the June, aviation board meeting to formally request of the city commission that we start a planning subcommittee for the 2029 event, because it's really not too early to start now, because you as a board, we as a city, I think really want to have everything in place by 2028, you know, especially thinking budget cycles, and we'll need some extra budget, for that event as well. So that means, you know, budget planning in 2027, you know, so that's right around the corner. But if you didn't know, the Lawrence Airport is on ground originally owned by Charles Robinson, first governor of Kansas. So that was a very historic tract of ground. And when he passed away, he gave it to KU Endowment. And the airport was settled there. Originally, with probably not a lot of agreements with KU, because officially the land as part of the airport didn't transfer until 1977. Melissa and I just had a meeting last week with Monty Sukup of KU Endowment. He kind of manages the land holdings of KU that we have, and try to find some more of the history there for us. So he sent me the original purchase agreement for the original transfer of them. But a lot of and we can pull up the plat here in a second. A lot of the ground on the immediate outside of the fences beyond airport property is still owned by KU Endowment. So, the airport has a long history, I think, of cooperation with the university, working hand in hand with them, not only with the KU Hangar being there, but, you know, I see Jake has a KU School of Engineering, Aerospace Engineering has a facility out there, and they've constantly got research projects going on. So I really see our airport is working in partnership with the university. And certainly these days, you know, one of the first slides I put up this afternoon with this tour group was the revamped Big 12, well, it's now Big 16, schools from all across this country. And so that's driving even more traffic to the airport. But the history is something that is really cool, you know, that the Army did training for pilots out at the airport during the war. I think KU archives will have a lot in terms of photos and things to add. I forget the woman's name, Lloyd, that had the thick notebook of airport history, that you passed it on to Clancy, we passed it on to Watkins.
With her permission.
With her permission. And she was a board member of Watkins, so Steve Nowak knew her. But we had a good start with that notebook as well. And so it's part of the agenda package materials today. This item here is the kind of the initial partnership agreement we have with Watkins to at least develop a storyboard of the airport, and hopefully you know, kind of a permanent display of airport history. If you've ever been out to Burroughs Creek in East Lawrence and walked that path, there's a really a nice set of historical markers there that is kind of on all-weather boards that tells the history really of that area of East Lawrence. And so I would envision maybe something similar on permanent display out at the airport as part of this this historical project. And then I sent Carrie and Clancy a link to the city of Fort Worth. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it yet, but they're celebrating their 100th anniversary this year. They put together a really neat timeline of the airport throughout the years. And you click on it, it brings up historic photographs of that airport's history. So I see something like that digitally coming from this project as well. So, and the other thing that airport did was put together a really cool video. I don't know if you guys looked at that, but I called that airport manager as soon as I looked at it because I thought the video was.
Is that DFW or a small?
No, it's Beach.
Oh, yeah.
Beach Airport, yeah. And they got some real history there too. American Airlines started there. Historic hangar on that property, so. So it's a neat project, you know, to think about, you know, we'll want to involve, I think, broader members of the community, and I'm sure that. So with the revamping of the whole boards and commissions structure, if you guys recall before, you know, we had a CIP subcommittee, we had an event subcommittee. Well, with the new rules, only the city commission can allow a board or commission to have a subcommittee. They have to approve it. So that's the new process. So I wouldn't see why they wouldn't approve something like this for the airport. So should be a, not an issue. The plat, been talking about this for a couple years. So this preliminary plat will go before the May 28th Planning Commission meeting. The airport has 503 acres. We're replatting. And so that whole plat is posted. And we went about doing this because, since I've become airport manager 4 years ago, we've had various development interests at the airport. Eurotech has come to us, Dream Air has come to us. I've talked to other manufacturers and developers that potentially wanted to locate at our airport. And with the existing plat at the airport, there are numerous plats. There's at least 4 different plats at the airport, and I don't know why it happened. But if you look at the existing plats, like along Bryant Way, they were kind of like a subdivision plat. And it didn't mesh with the airport master plan at all. So I don't know why it was done that way, but it was. And that made it more difficult for, like, when Lloyd's group and Conflicts group developed that new hangar, you can't build over existing lot lines. So they had to go through the replanning process, and it just took longer, and it makes for more expensive and complicated development. So the idea was to replat the airport into one entire lot, which we're doing with this project, to hopefully make redevelopment, building of hangars, construction much easier. An applicant will still have to go through the site planning process with the city's planning and development services. But you won't have to go through the full subdivision replatting, which is an expensive and time-consuming process as well. It's also there, yeah.
That's the old plat.
Scott, what I want to
This
know
is
is
current.
with
Right.
the May 28th Planning Commission meeting,
Right.
what happens after that?
Yeah,
Does it
so
go
the
to
city
the
commission,
FAA or city
The
commission?
city commission has to approve final plat, so I think we've got a schedule for that first one in July. City commission level?
What about the FAA? Do they have any?
No, I know we've shared it with, like, Russell Holmes, our central region planner.
Okay, but they don't have any.
Comment on it. It doesn't really affect anything FAA per se. It's just again, the whole idea was to make development easier. We've also learned, everything about the airport in terms of where all the easements are at, where electrical and gas lines are located. One of the other interesting things that we found out as part of this process, there's a road up on the north side of the airport called 1950 Road. It kind of, it's right here, it goes along Mud Creek. Well, as it turns out, that's not a county road at all. It's part of the airport property. And that really helps us if we ever wanted to expand the primary runway. Some of the obstacles Garver was running into with the feasibility study was impacting that road right away and maybe having to close that road. So that was another good discovery as part of the replat process. Other questions about plat?
Building map is what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of stuff that I didn't really know who's where.
The little things to the west of the airport looks legit.
That's what we're gonna find out. Okay. Because,
That's what you need to do.
yeah,
That plat map also had kind of the current ownership. So there are, on the west side of the airport, there are a couple residential structures. There are a couple farmers that own ground to the north of the KU endowment property. The Dobskis own that tract where the historic farmhouse is on the
yeah.
southwest corner there. And they're the Lawrence McDonald's franchisees.
Wow, that's,
So it's kind of interesting just to look at
yeah.
the ownership of the land.
Now, Ron, hi, Ron.
Hey, Ron.
I see that Ron's place is in which building over there, the Great Plains building?
You just want me to go through
Yeah,
this map?
good.
So this map was produced as part of our FAA land use compliance audit. They were trying to figure out who was in what building. So that's why the map was produced. So Ron used to be in this hangar here. We've labeled it Lifestar. It's owned by the city of Lawrence. It's entirely subleased right now to Lifestar. This was probably the oldest hangar out at the airport, I think. It was built in 1961. And it's somewhat obsolete. Chad's probably been in it more than I have, but, you know, it serves kind of for helicopters. They're able to use this I guess it's southwesterly bay door. But the other bay door would really only handle a smaller aircraft.
Yeah, I think it was 172 or something.
Yeah, I know Ron had one of his planes, his acrobatic plane in that hangar as well. Don's Diesel. This is a site, and I'm going to grab it actually from my office. Be right back. I think part of the original terminal might have been located on where the Don's Diesel building is now. So this is a friend I've had around for a while. And that's something I think we can use during our historical celebrations as well. Maybe we could, if we need to fundraise, this might be a source of some fundraising
I have
opportunities
great ideas.
with that brand.
So that's my picture of what, sorry.
I think the foundation of this building is underneath Don's Diesel. I know the old terminal from the 1950s foundation is definitely in there. So that west side of the airport was kind of the historic location of the terminal. Maybe we remember some of that stuff too.
I worked down that one, it was a mud shed.
Yeah.
The blocks were made of mud.
Oh, my goodness. Look at this. All right.
Yeah, the thing about Don's Diesel, and we can get more into it later, is that originally they were a diesel part business, but they had a plane out there and they would fly agricultural parts out to farmers. If you broke down out in the field outside of Beloit, Kansas, and you needed a tractor part, they would fly it out to you. Well, they don't operate like that anymore. They're just a diesel parts business, and the FAA has told us that, there are pretty strict rules in terms of being an aviation business if you're on airport property. So they technically can't be at the airport anymore. They also have a land lease that expired in 2007. So that's a situation we are working to correct among others. But they've always paid their land lease rent.
Did you just say you're gonna remove them?
They need to be off the airport, yes. Yeah.
Do we have a new hangar that we can lease?
I mean, it's gonna take some time.
It will take some time, but yeah, possibly. Yeah.
Is Don Diesel owned by a family in Lawrence at all?
Yeah, it's an Irish family. Yeah. So the father is still around. His son, Willie Irish, operates the business right now. Yeah. So Great Plains is the hangar that Ron Renz now occupies. It was built by Stephen Craig and added on to maybe, I don't know, Ron probably knows, 15, 20 years ago. Steve Craig had some airplanes out there. He is a Lawrence hotel developer. Yeah, Ron moved from his hangar, Lifestar hangar, over to that hangar a couple years ago. The KU.
Wait, Scott, sorry.
Yeah.
What do they do in Great Plains? They're just storing airplanes there. There's no like maintenance.
Well, Ron can probably tell you he moved his business there. Steve Craig, when he developed the hangar, just stored his personal aircraft there. It was like a larger hangar. But Ron operates his business out of there right now. Yeah. The KU hangar sets on KU property, and that's one thing we've discovered with kind of the land use audit. It doesn't set on airport property because KU always owned the ground. There was never any reason for the city probably to acquire ground that KU already had a hangar on. There was an original purchase agreement with KU from 1977 that kind of spelled out a few details, but we really need an operation agreement. Yeah, Ron, go ahead. Sorry.
Can't remember who was asking about what goes on in Great Plains. Steve still has an airplane in there. I've got 2 airplanes in there, and I operate my engineering consulting business from my office in there. We've got clients worldwide. We're actually going on a big marketing trip to Europe in June. So that's kind of what we do.
Thanks, Ron. So, there was some minimal agreements in that, what I would call a 1977 purchase agreement with KU, but no real operational details. And one of the questions came up this winter when we had the big snowstorm. Lloyd was asking me, well, when is the city going to clean off the snow in front of the KU hangar? Well, we don't have any agreements with them to clean off the snow from the KU hangar, so I told them we wasn't. I think Lloyd eventually probably helped them out. But those are some of the things we need to work out with KU, some operational agreements for them being, continue to be at the airport.
And the plat is the first step before you get to this other stuff. The replanting is the, no.
No, this is
Parallel.
separate
Yeah.
and, yeah, so. And Scott and I have had to learn a lot of terminology, but one of them is called through the fence. This is actually in the fence, but it's a through the fence agreement, so technically. They're not airport property, but they're inside the fence, so it's an oddity that we have to clean up. And that will require a separate type of agreement, to make the FAA, happy with how we have things set up, so. Well, that's why the first kind of conversations with Monty, trying to understand what's there, what's not there. And then we'll begin working on that, this summer, so.
And Scott,
Yeah, KU has another facility out here too.
said, just now, I'm curious, like, what is KU? I know they have like citation, seems like they keep on their hangar, but do they do other things? in These facilities out here or the hangars or?
Yeah, so the Chancellor's citation is out there. They had another Cessna out there last time I was in it. There are research labs on the top level of this building. There's kind of old lays and stuff where they've kind of stored equipment over the years as part of some of their research project in this old metal building. It's not really a hangar. And then KU aerospace students come out to the airport all the time.
They're drones
Yeah.
too.
They've had various research contracts with FAA and other entities for drone work and other stuff that they do out at the airport. Yeah.
That's the side of the airport I've been really unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
The other side.
Couple aircraft out there, I think, at least
Was
two.
that last year?
Were given these
This
for these
year, we had a-
Still, like, we had a thrust lab that they just chain a 172 up to the building and it gets some thrust data off of it. And in that north building, it does have a big hangar door. They don't store anything in there. When I was there, they let us use it as a design lab for our senior projects. So they had like a paint shop out there and a bunch of tools for small aircraft. And then
Didn't it used to be a club too? I think.
There used to be.
I think,
that was.
Yeah, KU's had some.
And so that there used to be a flying club.
Yeah,
Yeah, the flying club never operated out of the KU hangar. I mean, Scott's pretty much given you all of that. There's basically two airplanes there. It's the Chancellor's citation, and then the Aerospace Engineering Department has a Cessna 172, which they use for flights research. So all of this stuff going on there is aerospace engineering related work. They've recently been flying quite a bit in their 172. They've got some kind of a flight research program that they're doing. And as Scott said, they also do a lot of drone manufacturing there. They don't do the drone flying at the Lawrence Airport, although they have an agreement with the city. Scott, I don't know if that's still in place or not, that they can fly drones just west of the airport from that facility. So that's
Yeah,
kind of what I
thanks,
know
Ron.
is going on.
yeah, so KU did come to us a couple years ago. They had received a waiver from FAA to operate a drone as part of their drone research on our property. And so they were doing that kind of out in this area, but that waiver has expired. So we were kind of coordinating when they were flying drones with like Lifestar and Lloyd and letting them know that they were going to be doing that work, but they had a proper authorization from FAA for that. There was originally, and Lloyd may know, an old grass airstrip.
East and west.
Did it go east and west? Okay. Yeah. The other thing we should point out about the west side of the airport is this little access road. Again, it's on airport property, and it's probably something we should look at in terms of CIP projects, because Ron would know, it's in pretty rough shape. Yeah, eventually that will need to be improved, but it's just on airport property off of 1500 road here.
Ron, did you have something else to say? No.
Original set of T hangers were down in this area. There's still one left that our maintenance guys just have some stuff stored in. So that's about it for the west side of the airport.
Does anybody have questions about the east side, or are we all familiar with the other side? Yes, no?
I wonder if people could get a tour again. Was it last summer we got a tour of that one was,
I'm happy to give anybody a tour anytime.
is that you this?
Yeah.
It was interesting. The last time people showed us.
The next item that I want to kind of throw out on the table, and this is just to keep in the back of your head, is there are three basic kinds of vertical. What we've got is the ownership and sponsorship by the city. That's one entity. The next entity is ownership by one entity and sponsorship, meaning all of the work and all the other stuff by like an airport commission or something. And the third one is an airport authority where the authority takes control of the ownership and sponsorship of the airport. Where I believe that we should stick with what we got and make progress using that appropriately before we even contemplate anything. Even go to an airport authority would take legislation by the state of Kansas, number one, and it would take years to get done. We've got enough to deal with right now that we don't contemplate that. But I do think the two documents that we have, which are 2009 and 2022 documentation studies from the National Academy of Sciences, are worth looking at just for the background information.
This one right here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Airport governance.
The airport governance.
Yeah. Yeah.
They fill up this notebook, so if anybody wants to borrow this or it's available obviously online. The AAA, which Scott is a member of, also has made up this whole wonderful presentation about, this is a really good summary of the FAA starting back in probably 1903 or something. With the right purpose. So if you're interested in learning more national aviation history, this is a good document. And I would suggest, it's got a good read.
Is that part of the independent?
Yes.
That's
So
right.
that was some training I took
Yeah,
last fall
24 airport one.
from AAAE, the airport 101.
The airport best practices is what we're all trying to get to. That's the next item on the agenda, and it's just a one pager. I think the city's goal, and probably the board's goal, is to support the city in this. We have to find a way to make this airport self-sufficient. And it's gonna take a lot of work and probably a whole lot of interesting developments over the next few years to get there. So I just want everybody to be aware that we have to stick with a whole bunch of compliance regulations and everything else to get where we want to go on this. Past that, I guess we have two in here. The airport governance is probably the other one of these, right? I think they're just to their.
Clancy, this might not be the time to ask questions, but I feel like we've heard this term, make the airport self-sufficient a lot. Yeah. I think there's lots of different thoughts of like, is that even possible? Like, how do you do that? But like, I guess two questions of that is like, one, is there like a goal of when we're trying to have that by? And two, like, what does, maybe this is in here later, so if it is, something else.
No.
What does it cost to run the airport? What do we bring in for the airport? Like, how far are we from that goal of being quote unquote?
I think we're pretty far. I think that we have to have a good vision about what we want this airport to be, and there are two ends of that right now. One of them is, let's have a really good general aviation airport. Let's have self-service fuel, let's have warranty hangars, let's do the runway, the taxiway, Delta extension. Make ourselves more welcoming in general aviation. At the other end is World Cup, Big 16 or whatever it is, runway extensions and moving roads, and expanding on the airport businesses, getting more businesses, materials, including bar fees, the rents. Didn't we have a specific amount of money that comes from the city every year? Is that right?
These two are the.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I can go into that. So
So that doesn't cover it. That doesn't make it self-sufficient.
right, there's a certain amount of subsidy that currently our general fund is providing the airport. And it's varied over the last few years depending on the projects. So to say it's anywhere from 200 to 400,000, it's been the subsidy. And so we feel like that's somewhat manageable to close, but again, that's dependent on, as Nancy was pointing out, the different type of airport options that you all as a board would be guiding our staff towards. So on one end, that gap will probably easier to close. On the other end, that gap's a little harder to close and acknowledge that. So
For example, if we want to extend the runway, correct me if I'm wrong, when it says a minimum of 35 million. I do not believe the city of Lawrence will come up with the information.
If the guy sitting in the coffer somewhere.
It's just not gonna be.
Yeah, no, parking tickets not paid, probably not bad.
We just had to get 6.5 million in the budget, so, you know, I don't see.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Isn't it also what the city of Lawrence wants? That was the city's vision, their vision, and what they want to do with the airport.
We have to find out what that is, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, now. No public comment, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
At this meeting.
Okay, I must.
Okay, no, well, you missed the first call.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I have a question, like common wisdom is all airports operate in a deficit. Is that really true? I mean, I think a goal is.
I don't know, Scott's the one who's the expert.
I mean, I've heard people say that it's hard.
Most general aviation airports in Kansas don't operate revenue positive. It's a challenge, you know, unless the airport runs the FBO, runs the fuel sales.
Precisely.
Yeah.
again, I think Scott's point is about understanding where the board is, where the governing body wants this to be. And, you know, my direction at this point, from the city manager is trying to figure out how to hold the general fund as firm as possible. And that's the goal I'm working towards.
And let me just give an umbrella on this. This is the kitchen sink.
Mhm.
This goes from all the way up here to all the way over here. Whether we're a good general aviation airport and that's all, or whether we have other capabilities. And I mean, the shades of gray are huge.
Sure.
So when we get the new master plan, it will have literally everything that's potential that we could possibly even consider, and past that, there we are.
Yeah.
So
I'm not saying we shouldn't
I don't know, I don't.
be self-sufficient, but.
Yes, we should be self-sufficient, but I don't know what the answer is other than.
Well, and we would be coming back to you on. Proposals. So we won't be doing this in a vacuum. And nor will it be in a vacuum with the commission. So just understand each step will be.
And it all
Well,
has,
public.
it all has to be done in conjunction with the city and the FAA and whoever else has given us money and what the rules are. So, I mean, it's not exactly walking on eggshells, but it's sure is walking between raindrops. So, there you go. Okay, the next item on the list is the Aviation Advisory Board responsibility and roles. I just wanted to do a real quick overview on this. In 2023, the city, in late 2022, I believe it was, the city decided to revamp all the board's informations. Put out a report in, what was it, mid-2023, I believe. And what they wanted to do was set up a member aviation community, multimodal transportation, and that was it. And we decided that would not work for us. And, documentation that you can see in here under further down the road. But the point is, we managed to convince the city commission that. So under those rules, we now have these three resolutions which dictate how we operate under the city, including we can't have our own subcommittees. City commission to get like this centennial commission if we wanted. The way we had operated in the past was we had capital improvements controlled with 3 members on the board, since we couldn't have a quorum. We made recommendations to the board, which were subsequently voted on by the board. Now we will have to probably operate as if we did the board to discuss it. That's okay. We are now part of Melissa's favorite area, the connected city, which I had many conversations with her about how much I disliked it. And we also have to operate under the Kansas Open. But if you aren't, look at this. Does anybody have comments? Scott?
It's probably good to note that, chapter 2 of the city code also covers the airport, also covers the, aviation advisory board. As part of that agreement with KU in 1977, they are supposed to have a seat on the aviation advisory board. When we went through this reconfiguration process, we, as staff, I did, continually reached out to KU and said, look, you gotta nominate someone. We did have David Haig, but he left the university. So we're lacking that representation from KU on the board currently. And we discussed this.
Did they nominate somebody with?
No. We haven't done anything.
They did not, and that's one of the things we discussed with Monty Sukup of KU Endowment. And I've also had a discussion with Patricia Bergman, who is a vice provost with the university, who's kind of interested in
We kind of
airport.
expected she would be appointed.
What did they say? They just say.
Say it.
Start the ball, it's like-
Dropped the ball. They just didn't, yeah.
Yeah.
Get a nomination.
It's tough with that side of you're not aviation, man. There's
Yeah.
Standing by her. If they do appoint somebody, we just add them to the
No.
board, or they would have to wait for a turn to come.
We'll work through that here.
Exactly.
We're gonna have to work through
Soon. We have to work through.
And I have a question to the city clerk.
Good, okay.
After that, okay.
And then, I believe we were all present, or most of us were present for the AMCG airport. To- Basically, what that says is we have to align ourselves with the city's strategic. So we will- Now, what it is, we'll try to do it.
That was a required training we did.
Yeah, that was the first thing.
The economic impact, what I'm gonna say about that is the slides that are under part 3 here, the ones that I presented in August. Anybody who was on the board saw that. There were numerous letters that went to the city commission about keeping the aviation board as it is. With 7 members, so just having one on buses and all that speed. So this presentation I gave to the board, and there were, I don't know how many of us wrote letters, but I know I wrote at least 3 or 4. The important part of these is not how we convince them we should stay independent, but that the potential for economic development at this airport is a lot more than what we saw in the data that I extrapolated from 2016. We're working at about 60–70% efficiency for a variety of reasons. We have another 10 million. Presumably we had, if everything was in compliance. So that's what's valuable about these slides. There's also a state of Kansas summary here. And if anybody would like to see the Kansas Airport Economic Impact Study from 2017, based on 2016 data, it's available on the state website. And it's definitely worth a look. Okay, master plan. Scott or Melissa?
Yeah, so some of you were involved last month when we had Garver out to have the stakeholder meetings with kind of the next chapter that we're going through. In terms of the master plan, we started the master plan in January of last year. You may think, well, oops, pardon, I guess. Why are we still doing it? Well, it does take some time. And when we went into this project, we knew from Harvard it would typically take 12 to 18 months. So they're anticipating completing it by this fall. But the current, so they shipped out, several chapters that I think I've provided to the entire board as part of the master plan process. It's an important document because it's going to guide our work and your work for, the next 10 to 15 years. And the FAA encourages, it's not a technical per se requirement for airports to have a master plan, but the FAA tends to look at the list of capital improvement projects that are included in the cost estimates that are included with a master plan update. So that's kind of the laundry list that airports should be working off of. We should have been working off of the 2012 list, and we accomplished maybe one or two of them, three. But this next go around, we'll develop that CIP project list for our airport. The chapter that Garver presented back in April is an important one too, because it brought some of the boards that they had out at the airport. Because this is the alternatives chapter. It's kind of the fun part of looking at the future vision of the airport and where the airport can grow, and presenting some development conceptual plans. And Melissa and I met with Garver last week. They kind of provided us feedback from those public meetings. In fact, I think John Rostas from Garver and I have a meeting with Russ Owens tomorrow of FAA. He is our central region planner to kind of go over that feedback from the public meetings and to kind of get his input on some of the development alternatives. But it's a master plan, just like all the other departments within the city have a guidance document. Parks and Recs has a master plan. The Fire and Med department has a master plan. The county, city planning department. Everybody goes and operates, best practices, really.
And all of this has to dovetail with the city's strategic plan. What I will say about the master plan is that it's aspirational. We could do everything that we want, but it ain't gonna happen. But if it isn't on the list, we probably won't get any money for it from outside resources. And we still have to depend on the city at least for the matching funds.
Well, Clancy, to the thing you were talking about earlier was like the two different spectrums of the good GA airport versus the, large corporate.
And all the colors.
And all things in between. Where do we know where the city plan and kind of like how that aligns with our master plan goes and like what their priorities be with? And again, if I'm jumping ahead, tell me, but I was curious about.
Oh, you're
as
not.
we're.
May want to talk about, and Kathleen's been involved with a new planning document, yet another plan.
Another
For
plan.
North Lawrence corridor, and that will include the airport. And that really has, I don't know if it's ever been done. There was an old sector plan a long time ago that wasn't been talking about this planning effort.
Yeah, and this one is just getting underway. We're just getting the kind of final documents in place with the company that's been selected to do that process. It's called the North Lawrence Comprehensive Transportation Corridor. So it's really looking at a lot. We've dumped the kitchen sink in on this one too, but it's a very large study. It's $750,000, which is unusual for a study. Yours is expensive just because it says airport on it. This is expensive, just expensive.
This is almost twice as much as that.
Right, and twice as much. It's way more than most of us spend on any kind of master planning. The reason for that is we are looking at all of it, how it plays together, how it ties back into our downtown. How does it attract people coming off of I-70 into Lawrence? How does it support the functions that are currently in Lawrence, whether it's the businesses currently at the airport or it's the university and how it functions? What our residents need of this corridor, the people that live up here, the people that work up here, you name the levy, all of it. So
Fire department.
it dumps in, I don't know how many different federal, things, plus all the state stuff that we do, plus just livability, in this corridor. And what we're hoping to get out of it is, a vision for the future that takes the airport in down to the downtown. What does that look like going forward for the community? So you guys are gonna be asked to talk with this group, in probably multiple different hats. If you live here in town, but also if you work in this corridor or if you use this corridor in some shape or form. And it basically goes from the river and sort of to the east edge of our boundary, but then it picks up in the county, which is kind of what Scott's talking about. The last time the city itself did something up in this area, not including the county side of the world, was the early eighties. So I think the plan was adopted in 81, maybe 80, somewhere in there. So just to give you an idea, I was in kindergarten and I'm quite a lot older now. So, it's a big deal, what we're doing, and we're bringing all of our expertise from a variety of departments to play at this. We've given them, I think, 27 different plans that we already have on the books. That
They all
they're
include
to
sewer.
consider, huh?
Do they all include sewer?
And it is not,
And it all includes sewer, yes.
and it is obvious the airport could be a big deal, because if we do expand the airport or expand the runways, that is going to materially affect livability in the Northlands for.
Yeah.
He loves airports.
Right,
And if they live on.
and what endowment and the university, and other, landholders in the area. We don't know what they want, but this is a process to try to start soliciting all that and then gelling it. And then the other really big component out of this that I wanted to see, when I was conceptualizing this and working to get the city manager on board with including it into our CIP about 2 years ago now, was that I wanted a really good economic partner on this, someone who could do some deep dive analysis based on what was coming out of the study to show us what's viable, what's not viable, what economic development tools would be needed or not needed. Are these things gonna work? So it's, you can put a lot of pretty things on paper, but if you can't afford to make them happen or can't come up with a capital stack to make them happen, they're just plans. So that's kind of the other big piece is we've got a very, awesome firm out of California that is gonna be partnering on that with us. So anyway,
Is there an ETA for when this?
it should start in July, but it's a 18-month process. Everything we do is supposed to be 18 months.
And.
I
that
Study
means-
is 18 months?
Huh?
Study is 18 months?
Right, but it'll have spin outs during it. So,
And so they will see the new master plan by the airport master plan. By the end of the year.
and it's referenced, as something that's part of it in the RFP that we put out, the airport master plan was referenced as it's being updated and will be available when it's complete to go into this.
So what it comes down to is, as I see it, is that we need to work with the city to come up with the appropriate. We on this continuum.
Who is the visionary for this?
That's it.
Of what, of the airport master?
There was like, oh, the study's gonna sit on someone's desk. Who is the person that's like, this is a good idea, we should do these 7 things? Is that voted by city commission? It's you?
No, I'm the one that's coordinating the study, the governing body will ultimately adopt.
Who's that?
The city
Commissioners.
commission.
Okay, the commission.
Okay.
Which that may very well be different people.
In 18 months.
Yeah,
It will be different people in 18 months.
Yeah, especially the way we do things here.
Yeah.
So
But there'll be a lot of community engagement, so there'll be a lot of voter, resident input in.
but at the end of the day, it's what they adopt, but at the end of the spectrum within the airport master plan, it's what you all are comfortable with recommending that's gonna be important, because I can get up there and recommend, or Scott can recommend whatever Gargo tells us came out of this. If there's no support, there's a problem.
That's the way it goes.
I think that they
Further that.
want the advisory board to have strong input.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good.
I think
Yeah,
Ron said
this- Yeah, but I think the way you described that, Melissa, that was really well done. I think that kind of describes, and I like that you're doing this North Lawrence plan and that the airport's part of that. That's really good. I think to answer your question really about, where do we go with the airport? Having been part of the airport for almost 50 years here in Lawrence, it all comes back to money. And which way the airport will end up going is what entity comes in with money to do something. And that's the way all of the development of the airport has been done since the very beginning. There was a vision, we needed an instrument approach, and we worked very hard to get that. There was a vision, we need a longer runway, and we worked very hard to get that. And the airport board, our group really is the visionary for the airport that kind of sets the recommendations for where we should be going. That's why the master plan is so important, because it's all the way from do nothing to pie in the sky, literally. But it's a long-term plan. And as Melissa said, without a plan, you have nothing. And so the master plan is the document that says this is where the airport could go. Will it go there or not? It depends on who's got money to do development work. Like, for example, the Dream Aviation trying to build a hangar, like Lloyd's group that just built the most recent hangar. That development only happens because somebody has a vision and a desire to do something and has the money to pay for it. That's really where it all ends up in. Ultimately, the city commission makes the decision. All we do is recommend. But I think, as Clancy pointed out, why we still have an airport board versus we didn't is it's a very specialized asset to the city. And it's a huge asset. I mean, the city, and not just the city, but the country, because of the FAA funding, has invested huge amounts of money in this airport. Okay? I mean, the city's probably about 10 to 20% of those funds, but the FAA is the other 80% of those funds. And that's a huge amount of money. And our job as the board is to properly make sure that money is properly and wisely spent so that the airport can become part of the vision of that master plan. And that's kind of where, does that help answer your question, Corey, on that?
We don't ever do that in our traditional meetings. So is this a subcommittee that needs to do that?
We'd have to ask.
Or do we just do it like this? Where
We
we
would
just
have to
do,
do it like this, and I think it would be a separate meeting.
Yeah.
And brainstorm.
I think,
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah,
put it
there's
on the list.
frameworks for doing vision.
Yeah, I mean-
Somebody's framework.
we did it a few years ago where we all went to the fireplace, talked about things. We never really came out on the other side of anything really.
Yeah.
It's partially because we didn't have an idea of that's what we were doing, but I would love if we went prepared into a meeting where we had some ideas of what we would do, and I think we have a pretty good mix in the room.
On the list.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks,
Yeah, I
Ron.
like that idea, Jim. That's a good idea. I like that.
Ron, I appreciate it. The main thing is that I agree that we need the money, but we also have to have the right way to do it.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. And that's where the
So we'll
master
get
plan
there.
comes in.
Scott, does anybody need a break briefly, or should we keep going?
Probably have one more
Okay,
thing to add about the master plan.
yeah,
The other key update is updating what's called the airport layout plan, or ALP. That's also a part of the master plan contract we have with Garver. And that's an important document that FAA always looks at. Say, Eurotech wants to build a hangar X somewhere. They will look to see how the ALP looks at development wherever hangar X is going to go. And if something is shown comparable in the master plan,
the master plan.
fits. So every time we do any construction addition out of the airport, the ALP has to get updated. So that's kind of just another key part of the master plan.
Okay. Everybody okay to go on? All right, thanks. Capital improvement planning and funding is the next topic. And, Scott will probably give us a blurb here about the airport, tentative CIP list. There was, when we thought we were not gonna have an aviation board, we then, in existing CIP committee, gave a list of priorities to Scott to make sure it would get forwarded down the road. That is still a pretty good list, and it does comport with the 2012 master plan. And I am very much looking forward to seeing what the first priority is on the plan. And I hope it's Taxiway Delta. But that's just my opinion.
That's my opinion too, Clancy, so you're not alone.
Okay. So the capital improvement list in the 2012 master plan, we got 3 things done. We got a fence. We did 1533, and I think we did some water or sewage management or something. I don't remember exactly what it was. There were 3 things we got out of 35 on the list over a 12-year period. That doesn't mean we didn't do anything else. It just means that items on that priority list didn't, but a whole lot of other CIP stuff did. Basically, the board about once a year has to be able to take from the master plan and get to the city what we believe the priorities are for the next year. Now, Scott works on a 5-year basis. We have some things planned out like the Apron right now. But he has 3 separate fiscal years to work with, plus all kinds of deadlines on grant applications and that kind of thing. So at least once a year, we probably ought to have a meeting that prioritizes what the capital improvements are that we would hope the city can get at if we don't already have it planned, or at least for the next 5 years in
It would have
order.
to include, it would have to be something that we do every, probably December or January,
Exactly.
timeframe, so.
So it'll be a December meeting. Now, this is why we had the subcommittee task, because it was easier to get 3 people on the subcommittee together to make a recommendation, and we would work with Scott and the city engineer when we developed all that stuff. So, you know,
Clayton, I think this was like towards my beginning. I'm starting to remember.
Yeah,
I think I had
yeah.
just gotten on the board
Yeah.
when you guys were putting this list
Yeah.
together. And I guess my question is, we kind of just look at this kind of priority
Mhm.
list that's up here now. Again, I don't have any qualms with anything that's on here, but just curious of like, how does the city maybe then, and this might be a Scott Melissa question, how does the city then take this list and create any type of priority of it? Or maybe there hasn't been, and that's okay too. I'm just curious of like, you have this list now, Scott. What do you all do with it then, and how does that kind of go for like when you're looking for grants, or when you're looking for what the city's budget needs to be for us for next year? Just curious how that process goes after that.
Do you want me to handle?
Or if I'm skipping ahead, tell me about it.
You talk about how you get stuff on, and then I'll talk
Yeah.
about the rest of it.
It's a rather complicated process. It's been my experience as I've been airport manager the past, 4 years now, is that FAA Airport Improvement Program is severely underfunded. The FAA Reauthorization Act last year, I think is going to help general aviation airports a little bit, but it's still an underfunded program. So one of the reasons why we haven't accomplished much out of that last master plan is FAA is laser focused on priorities. Primary runway, what shape is it in? Your taxiway that serves your primary, what shape is it in? And then everything else is bottom feeder grants. So that's been FAA priority. It still is. From the state of Kansas, we also have the Kansas Airport Improvement Program, KIOP. That program was severely underfunded for the past 10 years. It was set at the $5 million level statewide 20 years ago. During our last legislative session, we were able to increase that funding in that program, tripled it to $15 million, but it's still super underfunded. During this last cycle, the state received something like 45 grant applications totaling $75+ million for $15 million pot of funds. And so the state is, and our new aviation director, AC, still laser focused on asphalt, your primary asphalt conditions. And the state contracted actually with Garver a couple years ago. They developed PCI scores, pavement condition index scores, for kind of every critical piece of asphalt on airports statewide. And so that's what the state and FAA has really been laser focused on in terms of their grants. So that's just a tiny piece of the
The
pie.
ramp is
I just wanted to point out, backing up a minute, so, yeah, the projects, sure, they're prioritized by this, this is part of the city list. But it's not, most of it isn't gonna get paid from the city, so
Right.
that's why he jumped to the federal funding problem. So you can put them on the list, but they're not funded, so just
Yeah.
jump to that.
So
And sometimes there's a
Yeah.
lag between, for example, when we do the design work on the taxiway Delta, it may sit around for 4 years until we get money to do it.
right, so
Or do the environmental stuff. or whatever.
we'll always be looking at how do we keep moving things forward? Even if that means design and then it sits until we find funds. Or we can, as Scott's done, piecemeal bits of funds together and makes a real fun, tricky way of submitting for reimbursement and all those other things, but Kathleen's on that, so.
Well, let me just make one more little point here. One of the reasons, I mean, there was some discussion, as I recall, about why are we redoing the interior of the terminal when we need a road worse? Part of it is because sometimes the money comes with strings, and we don't have a choice about what we do with it. Now, I really like the new terminal, and I think it's ginger peachy, but I would have rather had a road or a taxiway or something.
Or we don't get enough funds and we put it at what we can.
Exactly.
Right.
Project.
Yeah, but
We
then,
designed the road improvements with the terminal project, and that was part of our grant application.
so we got.
There wasn't enough money to do both.
So we got the.
We got the design done.
Got the design,
And parking spots.
This is just
And
normal life in government.
except for the
Yep.
trees went away, which I'm still good at that.
That's all.
It goes back to my statement of it all comes down to the money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Normal.
Melissa, go ahead. I cut
Well,
you off.
and what we do once it's in the city's court, so these projects that show up on here are clearly based on not only the master plan work, but also condition assessments and things of that nature. What happens is whatever the city's matches, then we have to figure out how to prioritize the dollars that we have, which are then in competition with a whole variety of other general fund related. So every street, road, bridge in the city that comes out of the general fund, fire truck, police, whatever, you name it. It then goes into that competition and then it gets rated through our strategic plan, which why Clancy mentions that, but through the strategic plan, the goal is to prioritize based on well-maintained, functional, efficient infrastructure, facilities, and other assets. So we want to try to do that. But if we have matching dollars, okay, meaning significant matching dollars like we often have here, that's what allows some of this stuff to move. Yeah, so we'll throw money at this because we have grant match and we can take our money further. Then it's something where we couldn't go very far because we don't have as much.
If the city
Yeah.
only has to spend $50,000, $500,000.
We'll find it.
project, they're gonna find $50,000.
This is why we haven't
Well-
got the 2 hangars. There's no grant match.
No,
Well,
never.
So like ideally, all right, ideally, the airport generates enough resources and revenue to cover its operations and with a reserve to pay for the matches once we get the grant application.
And then that gets us out of this.
Then we don't have to compete with the general, fund, the city government.
But for example, if we did want to build 12 teenagers, there's no way that currently we could generate enough money coming in the city or the airport to do that, that would require some kind of,
You have to have
like,
a bond.
bond issue or something.
Right, you have to do a bond issue, and currently, the city is out of basically geo debt, which is kind of our cap.
Yeah.
So we're not in a spot over the next 5 to 7 years to be adding general obligation debt that just can't do. We've spent a lot of money putting in new roadway and fixing some really
You don't say.
significant deviations. Yes. I would say, yeah.
To keep just going down, I guess you brought up this like line of thought with T-Angers, and I'm not saying that should be a part of it, but I'm just thinking through like, does the city put more value on financing or doing things that then return that payment, right? Like, you build more chambers, you would then bring in more money, right? Like,
But
it's
you're only gonna get about $40,000 a year.
sure, yeah, I'm not saying it's not gonna pay,
But
it's not gonna pay for itself
Right,
tomorrow.
we have
but,
to
like-
do an analysis on,
How long does it take?
right, and it comes back to elasticity of demand. Are you willing to pay enough for us to cover the debt we have to issue? Right?
So what's it gonna cost to build 15 years? A couple $1 million, right?
And how
So,
long,
and
how much rent?
You're
yeah.
not gonna get 40 or
I like
$50,000
paying
in your bank.
$300 I'll pay now, so, yeah.
Right, so that's where that becomes like, we would have to understand that there's enough of a demand to do that. And then the question is the city commission willing to put its good faith and credit behind that? And, you would have to go show them, we have enough people willing to pay.
North Cardinal.
Like Ron said, it goes back to the.
It is, all of the instruments, that's what I was
Yeah, I
saying.
mean, they want us to get the airport in the black. I mean, that's the.
Well, you kind of have to spend some money though,
Okay.
to make some.
Raise the prices until then.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're never gonna be able to raise prices enough though to get out of it. You have to do some type of investment somewhere. I'm not saying it should be taken.
So we're ready to
Whatever.
hear what the CIP projects are for the next 4 or 5 years. Scott, are you ready? Okay,
Sure.
go.
Well, so annually, the FAA makes this update. This is the kind of the document we upload into the AEP with FAA, Airport External Portal. FAA has all these different systems that, they want you to learn. But this is, to be eligible for project funds through the Airport Improvement Program of FAA, AIP. And so annually, this comes to you. I usually put it on like a December or January agenda for us to look at. And we annually kind of update project data sheets. So each particular project, like the Apron, will have a pretty detailed data sheet attached to that project that we also uploaded to this FAA system. And that's what the FAA Central Region planners and engineers look through when they're allocating AIP dollars in the Central Region. And we're developing this list on a whole combination of things. A big one was, again, that master plan from 2012, but also the recent Garver statewide PCI scores. Like, for instance, we note here what the PCI value is for Taxiway A. In my mind, that's our next big project we need to tackle because it's shot. I mean, you don't want a PCI score really falling below 65, or you're going to have a full-blown reconstruction project versus what we're going to do on Runway 119, which is just a rehab of the concrete cracking and spalling. So we got to stay on top of your infrastructure. It's going to cost you more money, and that's why the state of Kansas, paid to have that study done so that the state kind of understands the condition of airport infrastructure as well. So right now, we are doing C, and I think B runs along the northern part of the Apron, right, Lloyd, in terms of the taxiway call outs. So we're going to do those two with the Apron project. In my mind, Taxiway A is pretty high on the list to get funded for our next round of either state of Kansas grants or airport improvement funds. Or I think the other thing we haven't quite talked about is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that passed in the fall of 2021. that legislation had 5 years of funding for our airport above and beyond what we normally get. And it's also called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill for short. It allocated $295,000 annually to our airport for 5 years. So we used 2 years of that funding of the bill funds with the T Hangar taxi lane project. We've still got 3 more years of funding. No, we only used 1 year funding with the
Yeah.
taxi lane project. We've got 4 more years to utilize. We're using part of our bill funds that we have available for the Apron project. And FAA also allocated some airport improvement dollars with that funding that they've hopefully going to award us on that as well. But that's a pot of funds that we want to make sure that we utilize before they expire. The city is also, our airport is also part of the NIPIAS system, the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. It's an FAA designation. And with that, we get $150,000 annually each year. So that pot of funds just kind of builds up until you're ready to do a project. Well, can't do anything for $150,000. I mean, literally nothing. So we have to let that pot of funds, kind of grow, but so we can allocate it to a project. So we've got, I think, 1 year of NIPIAS funds expiring that we're going to roll into the Apron project as well.
Yeah.
So we're doing the Apron hopefully this summer. Again, the PCI from 2021 was 29. I mean, it's shot.
Just so you know, we try to aim for our roads to be at about 70. So, and a lot of them are at 70. So we average about 55 in town. So the fact that you're 29, so I'm just trying to get 100 is the best.
Right.
0.
We've all been on the ramp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just understand, like, well, this would have been fixed if it was in the city.
So I don't know if the scale's exactly the same as roads, because you
It
just
is.
said.
It
It is? Oh, because you said that
Yeah.
65.
The
65
state,
is a reconstruction.
the state targeted with I remember, some of you may remember that the state had this joint airport task force, a statewide effort last year when we were kind of looking at the data. That task force report that was presented to the legislature had to give them kind of a ballpark number. It's going to be astronomical. And so they kind of picked 65 as a target to at least have airport surfaces meet and be a threshold for in their categorization of being at least in a good condition.
Oh, okay, it's good, but not necessarily they're failing.
Right.
Failing's still like 30, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
same as the road. Okay.
So the extension of Taxiway D is on our list, and this last year, we added it to the city's CIP list. We also applied for KIP funding for design in this last round. Again, see, Mike. Oh, yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah. Again, and I told Clancy this when we gathered on Monday to review the retreat stuff from today. If you guys want to get this project done, you should set up a meeting with the state. Because again, they're focused on existing asphalt conditions. And this is a safety concern, which the state is also, and the FAA is concerned about, but it's never going to score probably high enough to get a grant award. You're really going to have to convince those leaders that this is a priority at our airport. The city has it scheduled for funding. We want to get a grant agreement out of you to get this done. And part of it, we'll probably need to wait, for the master plan to show exactly where that extension is going to be, because Garver showed it on some concept plans that were presented last month. And I think that's one of the things we're going to go over with Russ Owens tomorrow, that Taxiway D extension, because he had, as an airport planner, a little bit of concern with how
Well,
it
there
was shown.
Yeah, there were concerns about whether the extension and the part that now intersects with 1533 should be at a 90-degree angle rather than the 1 degree. So
It's a fun.
I don't know the answer to that.
And it's probably going to be a somewhat expensive project.
The storm, KDOT how much, what do we need to do? Just gather ourselves up and go on?
We schedule a meeting with KDOT or have them come out here and you can
I think so.
show them the issues on the ground. Yes.
The taxi,
I think you'll need the,
yes.
according to the, resolutions we just discussed. Sorry.
Yeah, that would be a staff and board
Well, we
discussion.
could
Yeah,
do it,
That's-
because we
that's what I
have,
meant to
we
say.
have a
Suggest to me
quorum.
that it's a good idea if we do it, so.
That's what I meant to say. Thank you, Melissa.
Keep us legal.
So Runway 119, we got funding from KIP. If you read the Orange paper a couple weeks ago, 660,000. We think that's going to be enough to both design and construct the project. So we're in good shape there. The one thing that the state changed with the KIP stuff this last year, they used to make you submit a design application separately from construction. They allowed you to combine grant applications this year, so that's what we did with this project. The other thing to know with the state program is they cap funding on a project at $800,000, which you may think, wow, that's a lot of money. Not so much.
No.
You know, the Apron project is a $2.2 million project. So again, $1 million doesn't go as far as what you might think it is, but it's a nice,
We only have what, 18 or 15, whatever it is.
the state has
Is it
15.
crazy that the lights cost more than rehabbing the runway?
Lights are what, 71?
No, the lights are $850,000 versus. I just thought that was crazy.
The lighting people are expensive.
I guess so.
Dealt with
It's
like,
also crazy.
The other project we have on this 1 to 5 year list is this road project and expanding our parking net. We were able to get this designed with the terminal project. So the design is at 90% plans. It's basically ready to bid. We just haven't found a funding stream for it yet. So again, in terms of the big picture, FAA is never going to fund this unless we say, okay, we want to allocate our bill funds to this project. State of Kansas is never going to fund it because it doesn't compete well with on airport projects. So we applied for a KDOT cost share grant, which is another pot of funds through KDOT for this project this spring. We're waiting to hear probably any day if we get funded out of that. I think the state only had like $6 million in that program for the spring's allocation. So we could get it.
Scott, I have a question.
Yeah.
A month and a half, 2 months ago, there was like a freeze on FAA funding. Has that been lifted? Yes?
Well,
You were
the
told
freeze,
it was gonna take a long time.
no, there hasn't been a freeze. There's probably been a hold with shaking out grant applications from FAA because of some of the executive orders from the Trump administration. So,
Right, that's still.
yeah, that's still in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
We added the fuel farm, self-serve expansion to our 1 to 5 year list. And so with the Apron project, we're building out we were reconstructing the existing pad site that serves the fuel farm, which is a concrete pad site. We're going to build out a secondary pad site, which could serve a self-serve fuel farm. But the fuel farm itself, we applied for a state of Kansas grant. With this last cycle, we didn't get it. So that's
I'm guessing that's a little near priority list because.
exactly.
Runway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Same kind of calculus with the state. Now, if you look at that grant award announcement that the governor had our project and all the other ones statewide, they did fund a couple fuel farm projects, but my guess is they were probably fuel farms that, were at the end of their life cycle and they were just a dramatic need for those particular airports. So, the fact that we already have a fuel farm at our airport, and we talked to KDOT about this, why we are applying for these set of funds and, trying to explain to them why, one, we want to get to self-sufficiency as an airport fund, and we told them that. And two, we wanted to provide that 24-hour kind of access for pilots that need a fuel at our airport. And we tried to explain that to them, so.
How much overlap on your current projects does this have? Do you want to go into those next? List of current projects under item 6. Sorry, Kathleen, you're doing a very good job for you. What?
Well, we may just want to click on the outer years just to see what they look like real
Okay.
quick. So those are kind of the projects where I would say we're not actively pursuing discussions with FAA for funding on, but it's good to have them on our list. And again, when the master plan comes out, just like the 2012 one did, it will have a kind of a short-term projects, medium-term projects, longer-term projects. So acquiring land is still needed. It's eligible for FAA funding. Improved drainage, erosion control.
So this table doesn't have a column for state in here.
Right. This is something we upload into the FAA system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
the one had state.
Yeah. The reconstruction of the medium intensity edge lights. I know Sarah emailed some problems that, you know, she was noticing with our lighting system. It is getting dated. FAA maintains the instrument landing system at the airport, but the city's responsibility is on all the other
Is it?
lighting systems that aren't part of that system, and they're all getting aged. In fact, we've heard rumblings from FAA, both at the national and local level, that they're wanting to turn over maintenance of even the ILS system to local airports, which would be a huge burden.
Trained a person. to do it.
Yeah, that would be a big shift.
So we're not finding this system.
Exactly. Getting the hard half. Close it down. Yeah, you know, this is anyway.
You know, acquiring snow removal equipment, you know, that's a priority too at our airport. We don't have a dedicated building for our maintenance equipment that we have out at the airport, and we don't have really good snow removal equipment. And that showed up this last year with some of the snow events we had out there.
It drives down the runway to get the conditions.
Snow removal equipment is weird on runways because you don't want the same kind of stuff that you do on city streets on runways, because it chews up the pavement, gets rid of all the markings and all this other stuff. So it's a whole different,
You have to be driving down.
it's just, it's a whole different cat.
That makes sense.
Okay, what else is done?
Those are options.
Well, I think going back to Clancy's earlier comments, you know, a lot of it is kind of guesswork, like 3 years ago, we had it in the city's CIP for the Apron project, and we had our local match budgeted at like $150,000. Well, from my discussions with FAA, I knew we weren't getting funding that year. We had a couple other capital needs that came up, and so we spent that allocation with other projects. We went through some budget amendments and spent that money. So much of it is kind of guesswork because we don't ever really know from FAA exactly when we're going to get a grant award for a project. Now, it's been a little easier with this bill slush money, I would call it, because we can go to them, and that's how we got the Taxiway project done. You know, I and Garver, we said to the FAA, look, we want to spend our bill funds on this project. You have to allocate it to us. But it was like pulling teeth with them to get them to shake loose that grant agreement, even though we had those funds dedicated that we could spend on any eligible project. But it has been a little easier with that allocation to at least kind of program with FAA how you want to allocate those bill funds.
I think what finally convinced them is that we were gonna have a collapse on that one taxiway in front of the Alpha T hangars. Because if we didn't do it, that whole thing was just gonna subside and be taken in from the. You know, that.
And they said it had to get that bad.
Likewise, it's somewhat guesswork to know how the state is going to allocate their grant awards too, because we submitted, I think, for 5 different projects and we ended up getting 119. And we did have a one-on-one meeting with the state back in January, and they did, kudos to them, make us prioritize our projects, and that was at the top of our priority list because, again, it's a concrete runway, it's in good shape, but it needs fixing or it's going to continue to deteriorate. They understood that and they funded it. So, you know, kind of kudos to them.
So what's going on now is, under the current projects under item 6 is the Apron rehab and taxiway Charlie, master plan update, which we anticipated in report at the June meeting, right? The taxiway operation, Sanitary Sewer extension, how's that been?
So these are under item 6 are all projects we have funding for right now.
Yeah.
It's just
Exactly.
the easements on the sanitary.
Just
Which one do you want me to
Okay.
put up?
Beat me to it.
We'll just see.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Because we
Just-
can't,
Do anything
we
without it.
can't do
Just the
anything
agenda.
airport without,
Oh, okay.
That's Scott's other job, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we're kind of talking about these list of projects.
Okay.
I thought you were-
And as far as, so that's where I mean, I think we've all been pretty much up on those projects for the last few months. That gets us down to what we have been trying to work on as a board and with the city for the next few years under item 7. We have a draft of the minimum operating standards at the airport. And we got a minimum standards, presentation. See, where is it, Kathleen?
Those are December or something, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If it's one.
yeah,
Cool. Well,
that.
You're working through this agenda.
I said 2 hours, didn't I?
That's just a little.
What's happening?
So this, where does this stand with the city? Does the board have to look at this one more time?
Yeah, right.
And where is it now? It's with,
It's back with,
Jeff Coleman.
Jeff Coleman,
Okay.
EMCG. And he's to have something back to us here this summer,
Yes.
June timeframe, I think. And then that will go through the process for you guys to look at.
This is the document that we had like a meeting at the
I took comments on
the
and
comments. So
we got feedback on.
feedback is nice sort of like that. Yeah, okay.
and then it'll go to the city after we
In that process,
massage it.
we talked about having an airport manager as a full-time role.
And then on the request list for the last 5 years in the budget.
Did that not make it in that group?
Watch the, July, city commission.
I was like,
But in our CIP planning, they're going to give special.
And that's not a capital item. It's not brand. So the recommendation is to move to the full-time. So,
here.
Crazy idea.
Yeah.
Revolutionary.
It just were one.
yeah, I submitted a reorganization document, back in April, March, early April, that showed, and also with other future. So that's sort of where we're at.
Is there anything else in the city that mirrors that?
I got lots of little things that mirror all kinds of things.
Okay.
Other people are too.
No, I meant like the Parks and Rec, do they have like a manager of just that stuff? Or is that? Does the city view those as the same things?
So I have a general manager that sits over, streets, and all of our in-ground infrastructure. I have a general manager that sits over solid waste. Since Scott's position right now is considered an analyst.
And he does a good job.
He's analyzing them.
Analyzing the.
And ultimately, I don't know that that's the right classification. That's how this ended up where it was. But that's the next step that I have to work on, is sort of what that classification looks like going forward. That is my request, that this deserves the dedicated FTE. Right now, we're split funded. I mean, some of Kathleen, myself and Scott, and the current year doesn't really include any of me or any of Kathleen. It's going forward that we're trying to like put more into this role. So
So how do we help?
We put it on the June meeting.
okay,
Send a letter to the commissioners from the.
We aren't acting today, remember?
yeah,
So,
Well, I was just asking,
yeah.
future.
And I'm not too worried about it because I got it in as a demand as opposed to like an ask.
I mean, I'll try that, I'll try, it doesn't really work.
And I believe the city manager's exact comments back to me when I assumed this with Angela handing it over to me
That's right.
a year ago was, you need to be in this as little as possible. And I told them, until you let me have someone full-time, you're going to see me in it a lot. So, and I mean, Scott does as much as he can, and I try to come up behind him, but it really deserves a full-time FTE. It's too many things, and there's a lot going on right now, so we have to have more dedicated.
Way smaller airports, but.
Oh, yeah, let's not talk about that. I mean, we had the Lawrence Way, and the Lawrence Way is coming to an end, so we're gonna have to do it the way that it's best for the airport. So I'm not too worried about that.
I mean, I think to me, the key point is to become compliant with the FAA grant assurances. So
Yeah.
if we're not, it's.
Because that
Not
FAA
good.
would like a full-time report manager.
No, they don't have to be
Just that
compliant.
We need someone to make us.
Oh, to make it, right, that's a lot of work to stay.
Well, we've been
Yeah.
trying.
It's fairly egregious, some of the stuff.
As far as compliance is concerned, that is what every single thing here under 7 is about.
Yeah, and
Every single thing. Melissa, you want to talk? or-
These are.
Well,
your
I
parameters.
just, I
You
wanna,
should draw
I want to bring up when we go back to the CIP, right now. We have a request, and Lloyd's aware of this, about, how our apron is, being rented or leased out. Okay, so I want to bring this up. This is not something that we've discussed before, but we've received communication from the FAA saying that that's not in compliance or in congruence with how the airport to be operated. That's, the apron was paid for by feds. It's technically our apron. And there's
Meaning
probably
the
a
city.
dispute,
The
the
city.
city, right? There's probably a dispute on this, but what I'm trying to tell you is they're holding our funds on their apron.
Who is
Uh,
they?
The
The
FAA,
The people who can.
Yeah.
people who have.
And so we've got communications with Lloyd, and we'll be working through that, but I want you all to know that that's something that's being worked on right now, but we are in, because of the issues that we are trying to work through, now the FAA is catching up with us. So just want you to know that.
We had very much hoped over the last 4 or 5 years that work on all of these materials would precede any issue. It didn't happen.
Can you be more detailed in the use of it at this time?
Well, way the FAA is explaining it to us is that, only the city should be receiving direct revenues off the apron.
I see.
Not Hetra, because it's not where they're.
Would the FAA make that same argument about all of the parts of the airport that they fund, or is it just the apron?
It depends.
But they find,
Right, and it depends on if we have a formalized lease. And different things of that nature. I don't know, Scott, if you want to go into that any further, but, we can give you more direct.
But I'm just curious, like, I know like one big thing everybody's talking about nowadays is like landing fees, right? Like it seems to be more of a thing that it's pilots are hating.
so that's potentially a revenue source.
It is,
It's potentially a way, I mean, I'm not advocating.
but don't use ADS-B to.
It's the tracking, yeah, so if I can turn off my transponder, you know,
I mean- I'm not advocating that, but it is a way that you can.
Well, and there's different ways, again, there's policy issues, right, which is what you
Yes.
guys will be engaging.
I mean, for example, it could be that touch and go training flights from locally based airports did not have. I don't know.
There's different ways to.
Yeah.
structure
Yeah,
that,
like safety.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
For the weight of the aircraft. So if it's
Exactly.
lighter weight, then we don't.
This, it's not a simple problem when you start. going.
Yeah, so-
You know, I flew for 20 years in California.
Okay.
So many people, landing from California was a.
Well, it's like we're going to fly in Europe. I mean,
It's a lot easier now to pay for it. Yeah, because it's all very electronic.
Oh,
It's like driving on a turnpike.
Yeah, exactly.
So they just like
Like the
find your
turnpike.
credit card and bill you.
Well, anyway, so more to follow, but there's different structures there, but what I want you to understand is that we're working through those things and trying to work in partnership so that we can get what everybody wants, Lloyd and ourselves included. We want that apron fixed. So, I think that's just something for you to be aware of and understand that.
So we're gonna do, this is when you run on the airport or just certain
No, I'm not talking about leases. I'm talking about,
agreements, sorry, I was reading it to say.
well, we will be working on new SASO agreements,
Yeah,
which we don't have.
all of this,
Those are different.
all of this is gonna.
Yeah,
play
that's what I might agree.
Presumably, in terms of the minimum standards, what we were thinking that we would get them in August.
No later.
Yeah, if Jeff Coleman gets it done,
No, he's gonna get,
he's gonna get it
I'm
done.
paying him, he's gonna get him.
And well, we should end in August and make our recommendations, and then the city commission has to go for it.
And these are the minimum standards and.
But the
Yes.
minimum standards are gonna unfurl a whole.
That unfurls the leasing policy, the rules and regs, the business application materials, the standard leases, and the SASO agreement. Once the minimum standards are in, everything else kind of.
But there's other things that are also triggering that as well, and we'll be talking to you more about that as we
Yeah.
go along. But there are more requirements that we will have to meet.
What is SASO some more?
Supervise the air service operation.
So that's.
Yeah, so like a hangar operator, like Eurotech is an MRO, like Lifestar, all those entities should have SASO agreements for our existing adopted minimum standards. The city has just never implemented them for reasons unbeknownst to me.
And me, yeah.
Okay, so like anything that FAA funds, basically they want the city to be able to use that, but the city would be allowed to then make revenue off of the operator using that. So
If it's a.
A whole bunch of structure. We'll go over that as we get to it. To unfurl that today, I mean, first of all,
We'll have another meeting.
there's gonna be lots of meetings on this. And we may have to meet, I know this makes Scott cringe and probably some of you cringe, but we're probably gonna have to meet monthly for a while to get through a lot of this stuff because it is thick. And, yeah, so you're gonna be spending quality time.
Bring the Pearson.
To that. We're gonna hold you to it.
Are we ready for it?
You're keeping us on time.
I am keeping that time. This is just to let everybody know
This is the
that the airport, this is the fun stuff. We have the World Cup coming in 2026. I want all this resolved by then so that we got a beautiful land.
I think it's 18 months ago.
And
Right, and they're gonna use some Parks and Rec out at Rock Chalk for
Melissa can
practice,
brief
right?
us a little bit on the World Cup. She said something for her planning committee. I'll sit on a
let me
little
get
one.
through the others before she goes to World Cup.
Yeah.
We've got the youth camp coming up on the 31st, okay? Yeah. United Way on September 9th, I think you told us.
Mhm.
Leadership Lawrence has already been out.
Real quick on the United Ways thing, Scott, are we doing the table thing again like you did last year? Or?
We'll have to talk about that, but
Oh, yeah.
possibly, yeah, it's the same event as last year, kind of their campaign kickoff.
Yeah, Kansas Air Tour, we did what, 2022,
I think so too. Are they coming back?
I don't know, we do it year by year whenever they. put
It's
up
like
their
the air
request.
race.
Don't we have to apply for it or
We
something?
do have to apply for it, don't we? And we.
And it's kind of
We
changed.
waived it one year because we had too much.
Yeah,
going
I think it
on.
was last year we didn't apply.
Yeah, and then
The new director.
Scott does tours like was that, the new generation people.
Today,
I mean, that happens all the time. So, and then we've got, I know that one of our pilots does Girl Scouts and somebody else does Boy Scouts.
Yeah, Tammy is good.
Tammy does Girl Scouts, and there's just all kinds of stuff going on out there all the time. And the Civil Air Patrol comes out and helps with parking a lot of the times too. So it's a pretty active place, and almost everybody on the field, Lloyd, Vortex, and everybody does aircraft and so it's been pretty active. Right now, organizations include the 99s, and I'm looking at maybe once we get the ramp redone, a nice new compass road.
Yes, we want to do the compass road.
We do, and I've got somebody.
You know, there's all these guidelines and the 99s have it, and then you guys are supposed to
Oh, yeah.
price the paid one.
We got the Lawrence pilot, and I've given.
I'd love to.
the-
You've seen it dry.
Yep,
Yep.
and
But there's no point.
there's a long, that's a long way away right now. It has to be a beautiful day.
Oh, God, you guys are.
Say Secure Point.
Do you know if there's regular buried on Apron?
I'm sure that there is, and that's why a surveyor.
Not the whole thing, I just want to know.
We don't keep the same ones, because we also.
I thought it was pretty.
That, right, is a shifting, isn't it? Which one was it?
Paint spec.
One,
Would that be 1.9?
I don't know, it's one of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's rebar, that's the one thing that the 99s has learned over the years is we don't determine what way is magnetic. The surveyor. does.
Right.
Like it's
And
something else.
they usually, what they usually do is put ale. So that it's better.
A lot of the times the 145 repair stations use their composite to do swings for me. Problem is more and more varying rebar with it's the.
So we would have to know that.
Yeah,
Otherwise, we would have to figure out another place for it. And I don't think there's another place on the.
so what I would ask of you guys, I think most in favor is put, if there is buried rebar, paint that on there.
If there is one.
If there's buried rebar, they had significant.
Oh, good.
Because the reason why is like, if Tech pulls a helicopter out there to go on magnetic swing, it won't work and it may create a false reading for the helicopter. And then once they're off the ground, all of a sudden 360 turns to 340 and
Yeah.
So, but we're working on trying to get coverage for that to be happening,
Okay,
just so that way. But if you guys are gonna do something cool, then I don't wanna have something come out where we have some stupid placard that ends up next to it that looks gross. So,
can't look worse than what we got.
that's fair. That's a fair.
Okay, so.
Anyways,
And then I guess the last area that I want to look at is, again, we need to have a discussion about what it is the city and the community want from here. As I've said, these first three things here are on the GA side. There's a whole lot of other stuff that is on the other side. And I believe that Garver has given us a set of viable alternatives in the taxiway extension program have presented to us. And that's what we need to look at. So the strategic planning, all of this has to jive with everything else. But I do believe that Melissa's right. We've got a lot to do this coming year to coordinate with this North Lawrence corridor. We've got a lot going on with maybe the Centennial Committee, we can get a committee set up through the city commission on that. And that's about all I've got to say. So
The K-State strat planning slides were nice.
they were.
The whole sewer goals thing.
So if anybody needs to borrow my documents about the old master plan or the structures, I can be glad to lend them and everyone. Everything on that.
if we do a vision meeting, does that need to be in a county building or city building or somewhere, where is that?
It would probably have to
It
be,
can be, we just have to notice.
we just have to notice it.
Does it need to be recorded and all that fun stuff too?
Not necessarily. Just notice.
I was like, it'd be hard to be creative if you know you're being filmed, so.
Well, the other thing is, look, I will, my meeting is on Friday. And because we usually try to set up the agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah, I will not be here on the fourth, so I would,
If you want to come Friday,
that might work.
do that and pitch whatever you want to. Okay, all right, who else?
My brain's.
Okay, what I can say is our next official meeting is June 4th, 2025. Here. At 6 o'clock.
Here, not City Hall.
Here. 6
Yeah,
o'clock.
that's what it
And part of the
says.
reason is because I like talking to people in front of me instead of wrenching my neck every time I have to look.
Well, and really what we're required to do is do the Zoom recording.
Oh,
And
Zoom it?
then it goes attached and out. So, and as long as we get the notice out about the location. Now, when we're talking about visioning, we don't have to Zoom. We just need to notice in it when we put out that this will not be recorded or
Would
whatever.
that be open for people to come and do comments?
Depends, I think we would want to go through, so just my thoughts on visioning, I think we would want to meet and then figure out what feedback we want from others.
Oh, perfect, okay, good.
Yeah,
I just don't know what the rules are as far as like,
yeah.
closed door meeting.
Well,
It can.
It has to be
It has
to
to
the
be
public.
open,
Okay, that's what I mean. So we, technically, we could have people walk into a meeting and just listen.
just like today.
well, we can do it like today. We can hear everybody. Then I'll do that public comment.
All I can say is Zoom meetings,
We did last time.
all I can say is Zoom meetings are really useful. I was planning to be there this afternoon,
We're at
but
the fire station.
I'm in
We noticed
Tulsa.
it.
Who's noticed?
Yeah.
Mhm.
The public is always has to be able to attend this
Yeah.
board's meetings.
It just no one did, so.
Right, you can't declare an executive session because
Yeah.
one, none of this would meet closed door under Kansas open records or anything.
We're not
So,
talking about personnel.
yeah, personnel, property acquisition, things of this nature. So, there's very finite level of things that you can do a closed door for.
Okay, Scott, what do you have to say? Anything else?
I don't believe so. This is great meeting.
No, thank you, guys.
Motion to
Sarah?
close,
No, thank you.
motion to close the meeting.
Yes. Oh, no, we're not having motions.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, actually, we didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.